This is TLC to go.
You know, usually when you introduce a new teaching method to your students, you get a fairly predictable mix of reactions.
Right, like maybe some curious nods or just polite note-taking.
Yeah, exactly. They're just waiting for the syllabus update. But there is one phrase, just two little words, that will reliably suck all the oxygen out of a lecture hall.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Group work.
Group work, the collective synchronized groan.
Oh, yeah, it's immediate.
It really is. You can practically hear the eye rolls.
Oh.
And, the silent internal panic of, oh, great, who am I going to be stuck carrying this time?
Right, the dreaded freeloader panic.
Exactly. And if we're being completely honest, for those of you listening who are health sciences faculty, you've probably groaned a few times yourself.
Oh, definitely.
Because, grading these projects or trying to manage the interpersonal drama without the right structure, it can feel like a complete logistical nightmare.
It absolutely can be a nightmare. But, the mission for our deep dive today is a complete 180.
We're flipping the script.
We are. The goal is to take group work from that dreaded burden and transform it into, honestly, arguably the most powerful tool in your teaching arsenal.
I love that. And to do that, we are looking at a really compelling stack of sources today.
Yes, we've got an internal guide on effective group work, and we're pairing that with some amazing resources from the UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center.
Right, commonly known as the TLC. And for our listeners, the TLC is essentially your partner in education.
They really are the go-to hub.
Yeah, whether you're faculty, a graduate student, a resident, they consult on pedagogical goals, they help support your teaching with new tech, and they just contribute to the broader scholarship of teaching.
Which is so incredibly valuable right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the actual mechanics of how to run group work, using all their tools to avoid the headaches, we need to look at the why.
The foundation.
Yeah.
Why it's fundamentally non-negotiable in healthcare education.
Right. Why can't we just let them work alone?
Well, it comes down to a really stark reality. Group work in the classroom is a direct reflection of clinical practice.
Because nobody in a hospital is practicing medicine alone in a closet somewhere?
Exactly. Healthcare professionals do not work in silos. They operate in these really complex interdisciplinary teams.
Yeah, making split-second decisions.
Right, to deliver patient care.
Yeah.
So when you intentionally structure group work, you're promoting a much deeper level of learning. You're forcing students to articulate their clinical reasoning out loud.
Which is way different than just writing it on a test.
Oh, completely. They have to actively consider multiple, sometimes conflicting perspectives and apply that theoretical knowledge to highly complex scenarios.
So it's about developing their professional identity just as much as their clinical knowledge.
Spot on, yes.
Okay, I hear the theory, and it sounds ideal, but I have to push back a little here.
Sure, go for it.
On behalf of every educator who has watched a group project just devolve into total chaos.
Fair enough.
Does forcing collaboration actually improve an individual student's mastery of the material? Or, does it just create a massive distraction where one person learns the content and the rest just coast along for the grade?
Well, that is the core fear, isn't it? But the hard data tells a very reassuring story, assuming the setup is correct.
Right. Setup is key.
Exactly. For example, our sources highlight a recent study by Lee and colleagues published in BMC Nursing. They look specifically at collaborative project-based learning in global health for undergrad nursing students.
Okay, so what did they have them do?
Well, they didn't just ask the students to read an article together. They actually required them to actively design public health interventions.
Oh, wow. So they were forced to actually negotiate limited resources and, debate the best course of action.
Right. Rather than just passively sharing notes. And the findings clearly show that this specific type of active collaboration doesn't distract from individual learning at all.
It enhances it.
It actively enhances communication competencies, problem solving, and crucial self-directed learning skills. Because, when you have to defend your proposed intervention to a peer, you process the clinical data much more deeply.
Yeah, way more than just memorizing it for a multiple choice exam.
Exactly.
There's another study in our sources that caught me completely off guard. It's by Gray and colleagues in Advances in Health Sciences Education.
Oh, the theater one. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't look at other hospitals to fix group work. They looked at the theater. They used literal stage acting and performance techniques to teach health professions about collaboration.
I know, it sounds totally unconventional for a medical or nursing program.
Yeah.
But If you consider the dynamics of a theatrical ensemble, it aligns remarkably well with a high-stakes healthcare environment.
It really does. I mean, a clinical care team in an ER is basically an ensemble cast.
That's a great way to put it.
Every single person, the attending physician, the triage nurses, the respiratory therapists, they all have a highly specific role. They have to hit their marks and communicate flawlessly.
Right.
But what I want to know is, how did they actually apply this in the classroom? Like, did they have medical students doing improv comedy?
In a way, yeah, they did. They utilized improvisation exercises because, well, the core rule of improv is yes and.
Right, you accept the premise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to accept whatever scenario your partner throws at you and build on it in real time. So if a student is running a simulated patient scenario
Yeah.
and their peer suddenly introduces a complication,
Like the simulated patient's blood pressure bottoms out or something?
yes, they can't just freeze. They have to react, adapt, and communicate their next move clearly to the team.
That makes total sense. Because, like, if an actor misses a cue on stage, the scene just falls flat, the audience is confused. But if someone on a care team misses a communication cue, patient safety is immediately put at risk. The performance in a clinical setting is quite literally life or death.
Exactly. The teamwork skills that students practice in these structured group activities are the exact same competencies essential for patient safety in the real world.
They're practicing for the most important ensemble performance of their careers.
They really are.
So if we accept that it is vital, that it's the clinical mirror and we simply have to do it, why does it so often fail in the classroom? Why do we still get the groans?
Well, the failure almost always happens before the students even begin the assignment.
Wait, really? Before they even start?
Yes. It lies entirely in the initial setup.
Yeah.
The phrase that keeps coming up in the research is intentional structure.
Okay, I am completely sold on the need for structure. But, I mean, isn't the easiest, most efficient path just to let students pick their own groups?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, you just say find 3 partners, and they naturally gravitate toward the people they already know they work well with. It saves the instructor so much administrative time.
It might save time up front, but letting them self-select is a massive trap.
Why is it a trap, though? If they're comfortable with each other, shouldn't they work faster?
They work faster, sure, but they don't necessarily learn better. When students self-select, they almost always pick their friends.
Which creates an echo chamber.
Precisely. They share the same blind spots, they avoid challenging each other because they want to preserve the friendship, and they completely miss out on learning how to navigate conflicting work styles.
Yeah.
In a real hospital, you don't get to choose your attending or your charge nurse. You have to learn how to collaborate with whoever is on shift.
That makes a lot of sense. So the faculty member actually has to engineer that friction intentionally.
Yes, the groups must be structured by the instructor to ensure diverse skill sets. The internal guide strongly advises focusing heavily on the process of the group work rather than just the final product.
So planning how the group is formed, how they're trained, how they're managed, which definitely means extra work on the front end for the faculty.
It is an investment up front, but it preemptively solves almost every major pitfall that makes you groan later on at the end of the semester.
Right, you can't just hand out a syllabus and walk away.
No, you really can't. When you focus on the process, you have to start with crystal clear learning outcomes. You must communicate to the students exactly how this specific group project supports the overarching goals of the course.
Meaning group work shouldn't just be used for simple rote tasks. Like, you don't need a committee of 4 people to memorize the bones of the hand.
Exactly. Group work needs to be reserved for skills that actually require collaboration to be successful. We're talking about complex case analysis,
Oh.
intricate clinical reasoning, interdisciplinary problem solving.
So if a single student could easily complete the assignment alone in their dorm room in a couple of hours, it fundamentally shouldn't be a group project.
That's a great rule of thumb, yes.
Okay, let's talk about the biggest hurdle of all. You've built the group strategically, you've mixed up the personalities to avoid the echo chamber, and you've given them a truly complex clinical case to crack.
The perfect setup.
Right. But how do you prevent the 2 a.m. hero?
Oh, the 2 a.m. hero?
You know the one.
Yeah.
That hyper-diligent student who just does all the work the night before because they don't trust the others, while the other 3 students coast along for the grade?
Yeah.
How do we cure the freeloader syndrome?
Well, the literature actually offers a highly structured, systemic cure for this exact problem. Our sources point to a systematic review by Chow and colleagues looking specifically at the use of group learning contracts in healthcare education.
A contract, like a formal binding document for a class project.
Essentially, yes. What's fascinating here is that the first step for the instructor is just pure transparency. You acknowledge to the students that group work causes anxiety, but you reiterate why it's a vital professional skill.
Bringing it back to the clinical mirror.
Exactly. Then, step 2 is giving them both the autonomy and the specific tools they need to manage themselves.
Yeah.
You provide them with a template for a group contract.
Oh, I love that. It's like a pre-op checklist, but for student dynamics.
That is a perfect comparison.
Before a surgical team makes an incision, they run through a strict, standardized checklist, right? To ensure everyone knows their role, knows the patient, knows the plan. It establishes the rules of engagement before the pressure is actually on.
That is exactly how the contract functions. Before the academic work even begins, the group sits down and fills out this document together. They have to explicitly outline their expectations.
It's like communication styles.
Yeah, for communication, are we texting, emailing, using a shared document? What is the expected response time? They set internal timelines that hit before the professor's deadlines.
Oh, that's smart.
And most importantly, they define their own process for conflict resolution.
So when the inevitable conflict happens, like when someone goes dark and stops responding to texts, they can't just throw their hands up and run to the professor to complain.
Right? They have to refer back to the rules they agreed upon themselves. The contract dictates the escalation process.
That's brilliant.
It drastically reduces conflict. But the instructor also has to build in structural accountability. You can't just hand out a contract template, have them sign it, and then check out for 6 weeks.
Right, you're still the teacher.
You have to require individual preparation before the group even meets.
So they can't just show up to the group meeting with a blank slate, expecting to be spoon-fed the material by the one student who actually did the reading.
Exactly. Everyone has to come to the table ready. Maybe they have to submit a brief individual analysis of the case study prior to the first group meeting. It sets a clear baseline.
What about specific jobs within the group? I think the guide mentioned something about that.
Yes, another highly practical teaching tip is to assign specific roles. Things like the researcher, the synthesizer, the project manager, or even the devil's advocate.
Oh, assigning a devil's advocate is great.
It really is. When everyone has a defined essential job, it guarantees that every single student has a clear, unavoidable avenue for participation. The 2 a.m. hero literally can't do the project alone if they're relying on the designated researcher to provide the specific literature review required for the final submission.
Wow. Yeah. So what does this mean for grading then? Because that shared single group grade is usually where the resentment really boils over.
Oh, absolutely.
If I worked for 40 hours and someone else worked for 4, getting the same B- is infuriating.
Totally infuriating. The best practice here is to integrate peer and self-assessment tools. You combine a shared group grade, which represents their collective ability to produce a cohesive result, with a robust individual component.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
It could be a personal reflection paper on the team's dynamic, or a peer assessment where they evaluate each other's contributions based directly on the metrics they established in that initial contract.
But do students actually grade each other, honestly? I mean, I imagine a lot of them just want to give everyone an A to avoid awkwardness.
That's a valid concern, which is where the design of the rubric matters. You don't just ask, did your peer do a good job?
Right, that's too vague.
You ask specific, quantifiable questions. Did this peer meet the internal deadlines agreed upon in the contract? Did this peer contribute original research to the final draft?
Oh, that makes it objective.
It ensures fairness. If someone truly coasted, the specific peer evaluations will reflect it, and their individual grade component will drop, even if the group product was excellent.
The guide also mentions breaking the project into milestones, like topic proposals, outlines, initial drafts, rather than just saying, okay, here's the prompt, see you in 6 weeks.
Regular checkpoints are vital. Providing milestones allows the instructor to monitor the group's progress and step in with formative feedback to course correct early.
So if they're heading down the wrong diagnostic path, you catch it in week 2.
Exactly. Long before a dysfunctional dynamic ruins the final product.
Okay.
It goes entirely back to focusing on the process, not just the product.
Okay, so now that you, our listener, have this incredibly solid blueprint for flawless group work, from leveraging the clinical mirror to deploying the pre-op contract to utilizing milestone grading, where can you go to actually stock up your pedagogical toolkit? Now, beyond the programs at the TLC, the internal group work guide we've been referencing points to several brilliant external resources for deeper reading.
There really is a whole ecosystem of practitioner guides out there. The source document highlights guides from the University of Westminster, the Technological University of the Shannon, and of the University of Bath.
The University of Bath Guide is particularly insightful, isn't it?
It is. They don't just talk about theory, they get into the weeds of execution. They offer very specific advice on how to design the physical space or the digital environment to force collaboration.
Oh, like the actual room layout.
Yeah. They emphasize that if all the desks are facing the instructor, it's not group work. The environment itself has to facilitate face-to-face interaction and shared resource viewing.
That's such a simple but profound point. Finally, there's a very recent, highly specific paper from 2025 by Besh and colleagues.
Aye.
It focuses entirely on case-based collaborative learning in the medical school classroom.
Case-based collaborative learning, or CBCL, is a really fascinating model. It's not just a project where students write a paper together. In CBCL, students are given an evolving clinical case.
Evolving, like it changes.
Yes. They start with initial symptoms and have to debate a differential diagnosis. But then the instructor introduces new, sometimes contradictory lab results midway through the session.
Oh, wow. So the team is forced to completely pivot in real time based on new data, just like they would if a lab report came back unexpectedly in the ICU.
Exactly.
Yep.
It forces the group to abandon their initial assumptions, manage their frustration, and rapidly assimilate new information together. If you want to see exactly how to merge complex clinical case studies with active, unpredictable collaborative learning, that Besh paper is an essential read.
It really is a treasure trove of resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah.
The blueprints for the case studies exist, the templates for the group contracts exist, the grading rubrics for the peer assessments are already built. It's all there waiting to be utilized.
It is. And, this raises a final important question as we wrap up our analysis today. We've spent all this time talking about the mechanics, the setup, and the grading of group work. But I want to leave you with a paradigm shift to mull over regarding how we fundamentally view success in health sciences education.
I am always ready for a good paradigm shift. What are we rethinking?
Well, if the ultimate goal of healthcare education is to produce professionals who thrive in interdisciplinary, high-stakes care teams.
If that is the true clinical mirror.
Right. Perhaps we need to rethink the philosophy of how we grade entirely. What if a student's true mastery of the clinical material isn't actually measured by their ability to ace an individual multiple-choice test in isolation?
Okay, then what is it measured by?
What if true mastery is measured by their measurable ability to elevate the critical thinking and the performance of the peers in their group?
Oh, wow. Let that sit for a second. That completely flips the script on traditional academics.
It really does.
It means being the quote-unquote smartest person in the room doesn't actually matter if you can't effectively communicate that knowledge to your team to ultimately save the patient.
Exactly. The best clinicians aren't just brilliant individuals. They are force multipliers for their teams. If you can't translate your knowledge into collective action, the knowledge is clinically useless.
That is a profound thought to end on. Thank you so much for taking this time to listen and for actively investing in your own teaching practice. We hope that the next time you say group work in your lecture hall, you don't hear a groan, but rather the productive, energized hum of a well-oiled clinical team getting ready to collaborate. Join us again next time as we take another deep dive into the ideas and the strategies that shape our world.